Cool. We're doing the thing. Let me pull up the meeting agenda because I think we had a handful of things to talk about today. Um, all right, first up in the list. So roadmap review. Hey, guess what? We're doing dark mode stuff. Specifically, in the last milestone, Dan and Jeremy and Sasha have been working with some of the individual stage groups to build out a backlog of issues. Say like, okay, on this page we need to address this. Um, so I've created a backlog of issues for knowledge. That's the first group that's been far enough along to actually build out issues. So this is posted here. Um, for the most part, these are ready to grab. There's a handful that are, specifically the designer on knowledge needs to address some stuff before we can do anything. But beyond that, anybody can pick these up. And I think these are suitable for our team, for Papercut's team, for the knowledge team. Anybody can grab these. I think a lot of these are really small. It's like, hey, this text should be using a design token, so swap it from this class to this class. I'd be curious if, as y'all are getting into it and you see something that's huge, put a comment, put a weight on it so that we have visibility into those things. Um, but perhaps the outcome from this that I'm most excited about is that there's basically nothing in there that's critical. There's one or two things that we really should address before we go to beta. But if we just said for knowledge group, we're in beta, it would be a perfectly satisfactory experience for end users. So I'm hoping we'll see that more and more as we work through the different stage groups so that we're able to build a backlog of things that we want to hit maybe for GA or for longer term, but we're not looking at these systems of like, okay, we can't even begin to hit beta because we're going to be flooded with defects for this product feature. So, uh, Dan, I know this is specifically for the group you were working on. Anything to add to that from your experience working with Alex?
No, nothing in particular um, that needs to be called out now. But when we review active projects, I'll mention some stuff.
Okay. Sam, I saw you had a comment there of getting a walkthrough
I
of an issue.
did. Yeah, so I'll share my screen just so you can
Yeah.
see
Well,
what I
for
mean a little
one,
better. So if
um,
we open one of these
mhm,
issues, like use feedback design tokens for confidential issue message above comment box, you click analysis in Figma and click here so it's already loaded. Just make that a little
mhm.
wider. Um, this is where you land, and it's like, okay, what? Like, where do I go from here? Like, can we get if we get a walkthrough of just like where do we find this on this one? It might make it a bit easier for
Yeah.
people picking it up to see, where do we go? Um,
Yeah, I wasn't sure what detail to put in these issues. And also, I put them all up with a script because I didn't want to handwrite 40 issues.
no, no, I get that.
So
I
I
think
may
we
be
just
able
need
to
to
go
go
back
through
and
it for
like
one,
amend the
right?
description some more. But the model that I have is that first section in the title, text editor, all pages, kind of gives
Yeah,
you so if you go back to Figma,
yeah.
on the left, you've got a collection of sections and pages to go in through. And so there, if you go down to the text editor
I
section,
didn't
so
notice
that's
this was a
featured,
scrollable box. Jesus.
it's super hidden. You click on text
Okay,
editor. There's no
text
specific
that
page
is.
for this, so it's literally applies everywhere in the product. And then you'll
Yeah.
find that finding in the little list of notes in the upper left. And
Oh,
then that
up
will
here.
correspond to, a number, and you can find that somewhere in the page to see visually what it looks like. But really,
Mhm.
it's all about doing the thing that's in the title.
I see. I see. I think that's the main thing I was missing when I did a quick look at this was like that just
Yeah.
looks like there's five pages here and that's it. I didn't realize you could scroll this little box to get the other ones.
No, I
But
mean, you're
yeah,
right that it is a little light on guidance about, okay, here's the finding, what do I do with it? I think this is an
yeah.
area where we probably need more dev feedback because it wasn't clear to me if these findings would be, oh, well, this is super obvious, I know how to fix it, or if it's like, okay, we actually need more guidance from engineering on the knowledge side or from the designers to be able to actually resolve it. So as
Mhm.
y'all are getting into it and you're like, this is cool, but I don't know what to do with this, please comment and we can amend things.
Okay.
Remember, we're still learning about this process. And so whatever we figure out from this first time around, we'll do better the next time.
Yep. Makes sense. I just
You
noticed
know,
this was confusing for me, so I was like, other people might get tripped up. Let's
Mhm.
let's talk about this,
Totally.
right?
I can help clear up some of the what's for us and what's for group knowledge. Um, that's helpful. Basic in this file, the stuff that's purple is the design system doesn't really have a thing for it. Um, have a have a think about what you want to do, and we'll help you do it. The stuff that's the black outlined sticky, there's stuff that I think is for our team to do straight away, which is fine. And the yellow ones are likely to be fine to do. The yellow ones are, hey, something for this already exists in the design system. You should probably use it. But the designer might say, hey, no, we don't want to do that for any reason. It's not likely, but they might.
What was the language you used for the purple one? It's like, this is something that the designers need to explore.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
cool.
something that's not covered by the design system. It's something bespoke.
Okay. Okay. And you did a really good recording that you sent to me of talking through one of these files. Is that something you could toss up on YouTube? Or maybe it was already there and I just forgot, but we could link that in these issues as well of like, here's how you read this file kind of thing.
Yes, I will try and remember what that was and find it.
Yeah, you DM'd it to me in Slack just before we spoke last week. So hopefully it's right there.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I forgot I did that. Yeah, I'll get it on YouTube.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. All right. Moving on. Looking at active projects. James, you had a fair bit of this last week that we didn't have time to get into, and I know you had some questions about the definition of done stuff this morning. So I wanted to open it up to you to share your thoughts and questions you had here.
I think it's all covered in the discussion on that issue. That was the point of the issue, was to have this
Mhm.
conversation. So yeah, I mean, I, I I think we're all in agreement on it.
Okay. Cool. I will take a
Is
look
there
at
a way
that.
to sort of show that we're all in agreement on this? Does closing the issue show that? Like, this is the thing with Git. I say this all the time, right? Like, closing an issue both means, or could either mean we're not doing it or we have done it. Like,
Yeah, I messaged Jeff this morning about this to be like, okay, well, it seems like we're in agreement. I don't know what to do now. Where does this information go? I don't know what to do with it now. I mean, the purpose of it is just to get a better understanding of what is expected in a review on these migration topics. So
Mhm.
the primary benefit is just that we're all on the same page, but I don't know if there's anything we can do to canonize the discussion or
I can translate it and add it to the handbook if that helps, and then we can just remove it once we've stopped doing these migrations and it doesn't make as much sense, right?
yeah, perfect. I
Cool.
can do that if you want.
Actually, yeah, they will be much quicker if you did it, I believe. Uh,
Yeah, I like
but
that
yeah,
outcome
thanks,
as well.
James.
Yeah, honestly, like even just linking to a comment of, hey, this is what we're doing in the short term goes a long way. It just makes it something persistent so it doesn't get lost in the sea of closed issues. All right.
How do you feel about including some of it in the MR description? So for example, if this is a phase one MR, includes a condensed version of this is what phase one MRs are, which will help. I think will help, especially other reviewers from outside our team, um, save them having to go off and click and figure out what's relevant.
Yeah, that's a really great idea.
Cool. Yeah, I think once we get that handbook link, we can keep that as the source of truth and just cross-link from MRs as necessary. Thank you, James. All right. Dark mode rollout. How's this all going? Dan, Jeremy?
Fantastic. We announced dark modes in Figma to designers. We also managed to get illustrations in the UI kit in Figma, all working with dark mode at the end of last week. So that's great. As you mentioned earlier, we've done the audit for group knowledge, and there's a bunch of actions that's come out of it. I'm particularly looking forward to some of the bespoke stuff to see how they handle it, see what design tokens cover and what they don't, and learn from that. Um, Also walked pipeline execution group through the latest process. If you haven't checked the comments somewhere, I'll find it and stick it in. But this idea of doing a pink audit first to catch for designers to catch, hey, this is the stuff that needs a design token, apply to it. Then a more detailed one, taking a closer look at headings, regions, icons, stuff like that. So Vitika's, there's a recording of me talking through that with Vitika, a bunch of different issues for our team where concepts aren't clear or where expectations aren't being met to deal with. And Vitika, I just saw today, Vitika's also started capturing some of their findings from going through this process and tagging in other designers for their input and feedback, which I wasn't expecting, but it's very cool to see.
I do like the CSI mode for doing this. It makes it so much more apparent when you're reviewing a page to know, like, okay, this is probably wrong. Very, very cool. Uh, Jeremy, if you're speaking, I can't hear you.
I was just making sure that anybody could read lips. Something I'm working on. So I am meeting with the source code designer this afternoon to walk through the findings and go through that. Um,
As you're, is he still there? As you're talking with, I can't remember her name, the designer for source code, could you make sure to call out things that are like critical issues that we really need to address? Um, that was the big question I had when looking through the work with Dan. It's like, okay, we got a million things here, but like, which of these do we have to address versus can come later? So being able to understand that on the source code side would be helpful as well.
yep. Sorry for cutting out there.
All good. Did you get the message, or did you miss all that?
No,
Okay. Could
but
you
I'll
make
read
sure to
it.
call out with when you're working through it with the designer, what's critical versus what is nice to have? So I want to make sure that we prioritize those appropriately.
Absolutely. One of the things that in hindsight, I think in this we're learning this is that it would have been better to have engineering involved in these
Hmm.
conversations and not just go straight to designer. And so there's a going to be a bit of a game of telephone. So I'll
Yeah.
try to suss those things out so that their engineering counterpart can also watch and be like, oh yeah, I follow. Um, so yeah, I'll do my best in there to highlight those things. I'm not sure if we'll have time to go through every single finding because there's quite a bit.
Totally. Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. Let me know once you're in a place for me to come look through it. I worked with Dan and Alex to build out a backlog for it and do the same thing for source code. Um,
awesome.
When you're saying we need engineering involved earlier, do you mean us engineering or their engineering or both?
You took the bait. It's both. No, I think it's uh, for this in particular, it's their engineering because as Dan and I worked through this, it was clear that a lot of the issues are just they're just not falling on a designer or a designer didn't implement it. So there's a blend between, okay, designer, this looks bad, let's fix it. Oh, designer, front end engineer, let's inspect these things, make sure it's using what it should be using and it's being implemented correctly. So, and then the last would be, these components, are they being used correctly? Are there things that should be a component that aren't? Are there migrations that need to happen? So it kind of there's a spectrum of, visual to fully code. And to this point, we focused on pairing with the designers early on, but not bringing in the engineering counterparts to help walk through these things. And so, um, that being said, as we create the documentation for teams to follow and to have that support, that's where I think that foundations engineers or design system engineers will need to be involved earlier on to say, oh yes, this is the expectation of how they should find these things and document them and fix them. Here's where they go to find, the code and whatnot. So yeah, does that capture it, Dan? Anything you would add to that?
cool. Yeah, well, hopefully with engineering starting to look at this stuff more in this coming milestone, and then with everyone being back from holidays in the next milestone, we'll be really well set to work together in January.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sorry, I'm juggling babies and things at the minute as well. Yeah, engineering can get involved at any stage you need them. If they're not there and you need them there, speak louder, and we'll make. I say them. I'm included in that, right? We'll make sure engineering are involved. Even if the engineering on the other team are people who need to be involved, let me know, and I can make sure that we're getting them involved as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would be interested in just having a chat with engineers on our team just to know, like, okay, how would you approach solving some of these things or investigating these things? And we can have that conversation as we build out some of the guidance, to make sure that it aligns with your paradigm and how you're thinking about it and how you approach solving it. So I think that's a good place to start. Uh, Speaking on the documentation, like after this review today, I can start working on that. I know I've got like a placeholder issue for it. And I think my question is, where do we want those docs to be? A lot of times, like when we've done migrations, it's like part of the epic, but I think we need like a more, I don't know, maybe I don't know if it's part of the epic or I don't know, some other place that we actually build out this guidance because it'll be relatively lengthy, I think. I don't know.
I think
So those.
I think we should put this in the pajamas docs because what we're seeing is that this auditing is going to be beneficial for more than just dark mode, but we can start to build on it for when we try to drive compliance more over the next year or two.
And you're talking about repo docs, not pajamas, not design.gitlab.com, right?
Design.gitlab.com is what I mean.
I would maybe push back a little bit on that because we don't typically put content like that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's the only reason.
Yeah,
And it
my
just
thinking
requires
is
a
that
little
we
more
have,
overhead to format and edit because we have to go through the
yeah,
MR process and stuff where If it's just like an issue, just like some kind of description, it's a lot easier for us to make updates and changes and be more nimble with it.
No, I
If
totally
it's
get that.
pajamas docs, it's going to be a little
Was
slower.
there a permanent location for any like just like component migration? Like it's essentially what it is, right? It's pajamas migration, and we have
Yeah.
pajamas migration days. Felt like those all lived in issues, and there wasn't like a permanent home for that stuff. Which now that we're coming back a year later, that feels like a mistake.
That's my concern is have you tried searching for an issue in GitLab recently? Like the information
hmm
gets lost without being in like somewhere like the handbook or pajamas. And we could do a handbook for this, but it
Would
feels like it's core to pajamas itself.
the one piece that I would struggle with is there's no opportunity then for threads or conversation around it
Hmm.
along with that content. It's going to be completely independent somewhere. So as people have questions about like are they run into problems, where do they go to ask? Like where do we capture that in context? I think that there's a separation there that we would lose.
Hmm.
Could we just do like a Google Doc and then have that linked in the handbook or in design.gitlab so that people can find it a bit easier? And then you've got all the comments and everything on there as well, right? Like we can change what it is at some point. It just needs to be something for now.
Yeah.
Like
This is where
everything could be
I
copy
wish we
pasted
could
to somewhere else.
yeah. I wish we could always leverage the wiki a little more too, which we've never dog fooded.
My
Dan's
plan
just
has
been
been
through
doing
the
that with
wiki.
some
Is it
success.
is it fit for purpose?
Sounds like nothing we can answer in the remaining 6 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Well,
think
we can
this
table this
this
specific
feedback
question.
makes me
Like,
think it's good to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, we can take
I'll
this
add my
async
comments in
as
line.
long as we capture the content somewhere, even if it's in an issue, put it in a comment on the issue. I don't care. We'll figure out where it lives long term async.
Okay. Well, as a start, I'll just start documenting it in that issue, and
Perfect.
then we can decide where to move it. So
Love
I
it.
think we'll just start there. Cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
This last one can be read only if you want. It's the
Yeah. This is,
summary of it is that I'm getting feedback from leadership that we need to be louder about what the expectation is of teams because they're not going to be planning to actually do this work.
yeah. Yeah. I think it's been tough to set expectations until we knew at least a little bit of what the work is. Um, but I think we're starting to see from these first couple of groups that we can set pretty clear guidance of like, there's going to be probably one or two things that we do need your teams to do before beta. The rest can just go in your backlog or the backlog for paper cuts to pick up as we move towards GA.
Cool. I will go through my next thing very quickly because we don't have very long. Um, but yeah, so migrations, essentially we've looked at them horizontally and vertical. So horizontally being we take a class and do that across the whole product. That migration vertical being more we look at a page or a component or something and do um, all of the classes, all of the things, and migrate them to design tokens. Makes it a bit easier to review, etc., etc. We were talking to the CSS utils working group who did all the Tailwind migrations. They did exactly the same thing. They started looking horizontally and went, "This is a nightmare. It's really hard to review. Let's start looking vertically." So I'm just thinking, the what are some good vertical slices, like good candidates for this? Is it the list of things that we've just seen in the knowledge group? Is that a vertical slice, right? Like each one of them. Should we look at specific components? Should we be looking at like the CSS utils group? I think they just did everything in a directory beginning with the letter B. Like, they can be drawn up as arbitrarily as we need, but what do people have thoughts on uh, good lines to draw? Dan, you got the first comment there.
Yeah, I'd I like the sound of specific page and features. This matches up well to the work that we're currently doing with groups when we're looking at their specific pages and features. So it feels like we can do the work as a whole team like that.
like literally just tie in, like we'll look at knowledge as a like all one knowledge is pages, whatever it is, as a slice, and then carry on going through like pipeline authoring, execution. Can't remember which one we're looking at. Authoring, I think. Um, and then going through them that way, right?
Yeah, I think it it's has advantages of the conversations being fresh in both design and engineering but also be doing implementation like all at the same time. So that sounds good to me.
Yeah, I like that too. The only other one that I think we need to lead on is the view shared stuff, because it's incredibly expansive. There is no clear owner of it. And so we'd be probably in the best position to look at it and say, this is how it should work and drive that forward.
The problem with view shared is it's like it's diagonal if we're keeping on this same analogy, right?
Uh-huh.
Like it's a specific component that is then used across the rest of the product. So it might be we might run into similar problems with the review process that we're having at the minute where we know what that change looks like in isolation, but in the context of the pages it's used in. There are tools that the CSS utils group worked on where you give it a page and it tells you what components are on that page, which is super helpful. But I don't think it does them the other way around, where you would give it a component and it tells you what pages that component is used on. I could be wrong on that though. There might be a tool that helps us with that, which would be great because then we can say, look at these pages and this is where it's used in context, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I know we're at times, so we can maybe just open an issue for that and figure out when we do it and how we manage it. It's got to be done at some point, and there's again no clear owner of it, so we're probably the best position to drive it. It's just if we do it now or later.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Okay. I'll look at them. It's just the reason I'm asking is I want engineers to start looking at these vertical slices and say, okay, which ones? I think we can start with the knowledge ones while we look at some of the ones, right?
Yeah, we'll have
Especially
source code
given,
ready, hopefully by the end of the week as well.
oh, good, good, good.
Yeah,
And then yeah, doing what Jeremy suggested as well, and working a bit closer with design, we'll just pull them slices further forward, right?
perfect. Cool. As Dan noted, we're at time. Anything else we need to hit on before we wrap up?
Jeff, does anybody else want to be invited to that meeting this afternoon with source code team?
Um, I'd love to sit in. Yeah, I may or may not be available, but I'll sit in if I can.
Yeah. Okay. I'll add you optional.
Thank you, sir. All right. Hope you all have a good afternoon. We'll see you later.